The session will wrap up with a question and answer session with Paul and Keith Weed, who's the CMO at Unilever, led by Sir Martin Sorrell, who I think probably a few of you know is the CEO of WPP. And on that note, let's welcome Sir Martin to the stage.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Paul Polman, CEO of Unilever. Keith Weed, as you remember from last year, CMO of Unilever. The organisers... Thank you. Again, more. The organisers prevent us having an interactive session, which is sort of strange in this new media world. So we've gone to a bit of old technology, as you know. Every year we get everybody. If anybody wants to ask a question of our two guests, please email msorrell, 2 R's and 2 L's, at wpp.com, and we'll try and respond. We've got 45 minutes. Paul and Keith have just flown in from Boston, literally arrived this second. We're going to kick off with a speech by Paul, which I think will take 18 minutes.
18 minutes?
18 minutes?
Says. Then I'll have to do it in 18 minutes.
Q&A. Now, Paul is new to Unilever as of about
2.5 years ago.
2.5 years ago.
No excuses anymore.
Through Procter & Gamble and Nestle. Keith is a lifer with Unilever. How many years?
Well, so far,
how many years have you been?
27.
27 years. So, old and new together.
That will start rumours.
And I should say that there's been a major reorganisation announced this morning at Unilever, and I think that will be one of the questions that will kick off the question Q&A session. So, Paul, over to you.
Thanks, Martin. Good morning, everybody. And thanks for the opportunity for us to be here. As Martin said, we just flew in from Boston via London, so I hope I can stay awake. If I fall asleep here, Martin will take over again. I know he will do that very well. Thanks for the opportunity anyway. What I wanted to do is share with you some of the challenges that I think business faces, but they are equally the challenges for everybody that's in marketing. So I thought it was appropriate to do that here in Cannes. The message I will be talking to you about is fairly simple. That is that we're going to have to do things differently in the future if we want to continue to grow in this more volatile and resource-constrained world that we live in. Every day now you see different things appearing in the papers. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later. The context has changed massively from any time in history, and so has the language we use. Advertising meant reaching the mass consumer audiences is basically a single proposition. These were standard metrics. You could say it was marketing in straight times. Today we're entering a new era of engagement. This requires a new set of capabilities across both the brand owners and the agencies alike. There's more fragmentation, there's more complexity, there's more channel options, and the requirement for more skill in gathering and interpreting data increasingly, if I may say, on the run. In this new era, I actually see 3 key drivers for change. And they'll have a profound effect on the way we think about our markets, the way we anticipate consumer needs, and the way we manage our brands. With these key drivers come 3 challenges for the marketing industry, and let me just point those out up front, if I may. The first of these key drivers is definitely a shift of economic power to the east and the south. Kishore Mahbubani in his book, The New Asian Hemisphere, captures that fairly well, and it's going fast. And my first challenge to the marketing industry in this is, in today's agency business model, is it really the right one in helping brand owners like ourselves anticipate the needs of the next 1 billion consumers in this fast-growing market in the East and in the South? Are we truly organizing ourselves for that? One of the things we'll explain in a minute of why we made these organizational changes this morning. The second driver is the impact of digital technology, not surprising. I'm sure it's high on the agenda this week. And the challenge is this: are the agencies once more fast enough to the world of engagement? Are they helping to inspire advocacy through content that is relevant, cost efficient, and innovative enough to fuel positive online conversations about brands, about values? The third driver is sustainability. And I don't just mean environment, I mean sustainability in every sense of the word. Equitable, fair, sustainable growth. The third challenge is, have the agencies really grasped the sustainable agenda? Are they actively playing part in it? This is not absolutely about green marketing, you understand that. This is about a step change in business models and a drive to more responsible consumption. Before we look at these three drivers, the drivers of change in a little bit more detail, let me just say two words about Unilever, the company I represent. We make everyday consumer products, as many of you know. Some of our brands, like Dove, Hellmann's, Axe, Lipton, Ben & Jerry's and Clear, you'll find in many of the households. These brands are actually sold in 180 countries and are used by around a third of the world population every day. That puts us in a privileged position, but also a position of responsibility. We connect with these consumers as they use our products more than 2 billion times a day. This super connectivity, particularly in the new fast-growing markets, provides us with an enormous commercial opportunity and also, as I mentioned, a great responsibility. The commercial opportunity is actually to reach the next 1 billion consumers that will be coming in. But the responsibility comes from doing this with a way that reduces actually the negative impacts of our products on the environment. From sustainable sourcing to our own factories to sustainable consumption in an increasingly resource-scarce environment. Given our geographic reach, our growth ambitions and our values, you can see why these drivers are absolutely vital for our new business model. The scale and speed of growth in the new economic powerhouse of Asia and the other fast-growing markets is changing quite a lot of things rapidly. According to the IMF, economic growth in Asia averaged about 8.5% in 2010. Predictions are that this is likely to be around 7 or a little bit more in 2011, 2012, and again led by China and India. These countries, along with others, such as Indonesia, Martin and I were just there last week, Russia, Brazil, will increasingly take the center stage in this new world order. They will be home to most of the world's population and certainly most of the economic growth. Their consumers will be ever more demanding and seek higher standards of health, hygiene and nutrition. Today, around 56% of Unilever's revenue actually comes from outside of Europe and North America already. That is probably the biggest percentage of any of the major global consumer goods companies. By 2020, we expect this to be around 70 to 75% of our total business. So in some sense, we are the emerging market company. Couple this growth ambition with the potential connectivity with consumers, and you're beginning to see the size of the task, both for us as a business and for our agency partners. We need our resources and our capabilities and talent pools to reflect increasingly where this growth is going to come from, not where it has been. We have to shift our thinking to New Delhi instead of New York. The common denominator here is the second driver of change, which is the impact of digital. The internet has actually transformed almost everything we do, from how we take pictures, how we listen to music, communicate, access information, socialize, and so on and on and on. It is the defining invention of our time. I see evidence of this every time I travel. When I'm in India, I see the farmers using their mobile phones to check on the weather reports for their crops. When I'm in Africa, I see some people using M-Pesa, the mobile fund service that is creating a totally new benchmark in financial services to help low-income customers. In Indonesia, I see everybody on Facebook. Hard not to, actually, when Facebook is used by about 99% there of the internet users. The influence of Facebook and a handful of other companies can certainly not be underestimated. Whilst media companies have had great connectivities with consumers in the past. It was usually in very specific markets with a fairly narrow focus. For the first time, we now have truly global media companies. Companies such as Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, Twitter, Google, and Amazon. These companies have the capabilities to know their own and other consumers intimately. iTunes allows Apple to know what songs, TV shows, apps and movies that we all love. And Amazon increasingly knows what we want to buy before we are actually buying the things, leveraging their recommendation engines. The implications for the marketing industry are enormous. At Unilever, we've taken a radically different approach to seize on these opportunities. We've changed the roles and responsibilities of our marketeers and reallocated budgets to enable them to make content in an always-on world. We've developed a technology platform to drive production efficiencies and create powerful digital rosters. We're putting our entire marketing organization right the way to the top through rigorous digital training, and obviously we're working that in close partnership with these global media companies. Recently, Magnum, one of our ice creams, ran a fully integrated campaign called Magnum Pleasure Hunt Game across gaming, social media and TV, which resulted in it being one of the most talked about activities happening on Twitter when it launched. We certainly are increasingly seeing more of these successes. In the same way that Unilever is changing its approach, agencies too will have to find new ways of working if they want to be in the vanguard of this. This is particularly the case in the digital work if they ask to support the right balance of global coordination and local customization at the lowest cost. Agency structures will also need to change. These traditional models that map the global, regional and local structures of big companies are inadequate now. In the digital age, agencies need to organize increasingly around the consumer, not around the client. This intersection between the fast-growing economies and the digital is the arena for enormous growth. Increasingly, we expect our agencies to have a view on how to win in this space, how they want to lead, how they want to partner, and how they want to align our combined strengths. We have to look forward to see what this communication world will look like in 5 or 10 years' time and try to predict a little bit better its implications. What will the fundamental differences for a brand world that is shaped through mobile, social and video as opposed to TV, print and radio look like? One key difference will be our ability to measure efficiency and effectiveness, not surprisingly. You've often heard that half the advertising budget is wasted, we just simply don't know which half it is. Digital, I believe, changes that. Metrics related to online activity ought to mean that we can minimize the data, gain new insights, build one-on-one relationships with consumers, and particularly leverage that increasingly through mobile. Only then can we be sure of the right person, right time, right place, right offer. Again, agencies can help us lead in this area. Also, we cannot underestimate the influence of culture on the way consumers and new communities of consumers think and behave. This is not a one-size-fits-all global economy. I believe it's quite the reverse. In these fast-growing markets, the complexity of traditions, religions, and cultures mean that we and our agency partners have to work harder and with more dedication to discover these new insights that we need to be successful over the long term. Understanding these issues is critical to our success if we are to unlock the mass consumer involvement. So to the third major feature of this new era, sustainability as a growth driver. The facts actually speak for themselves, so I don't have to spend too much time on that. In the year 2050, there will be 2.7 billion people more on a planet that is already resource constrained. That is the size of Beijing being created every 2 months. But while these consumers become ever more demanding and seek higher standards of living in terms of resources, the world of the future will increasingly become scarce. At Unilever, we've set ourselves a very simple ambition: to double the size of the business whilst reducing the overall environmental impact. In fact, decoupling growth from environmental impact. No company of our size, or in fact no company other than ours, has made that strong and convincing commitment. Our Sustainable Living Plan, as we called it, was launched last November. It aims to halve the environmental footprint of all of our products, to source 100% of our agriculturally based materials sustainably, and to help 1 billion people take actions to improve their health and well-being. Doubling the revenue of a company as big as Unilever is a tall order. It should make you nervous. Doubling whilst reducing our impact across the value chain is an equally tough challenge. But the business case for addressing sustainability issues, especially in developing markets, is a strong case, a case for growth and a case for increased competitiveness. Today, a small but fast-growing group of consumers around the world certainly want their reassurance that the products they buy are ethically and responsibly sourced, and that companies that sell them are behaving responsibly. To put it in simple terms, consumers increasingly want products of great value from a company with great values. For this group of consumers, a more sustainable brand is often a more desirable brand. We can already see it happening. Our research certainly shows that consumers value transparency, and companies being clear about what they stand for and who they are will have an advantage. Latin America has the highest proportion of people saying that reducing their energy use, water use, and petrol use are extremely important to them. In China, where I was just last week alone, 77% of consumers say that they are more likely to recommend a brand that supports a good cause than a brand that doesn't. In Brazil, it's a similar story. By focusing on sustainability, we can create new markets. A good example is one of our products, Comfort One Rinse. This innovative Unilever product means that people can rinse their clothes with just 1 bucket of water, when normally they would use 3. Purit, our revolutionary home water filtration system, is another example of how we can encourage people across the world to change their behaviors to improve their lives. However, these innovations require consumers often to change their behaviors, to change their habits. And the challenge for communication goes beyond awareness building, and benefit communication has to be motivating this cultural or behavioral change. That's a much more challenging objective, but one we will increasingly have to address. Just to conclude the brief time, let me just recap. There are undoubtedly seismic changes happening out there. Some have called it the new normal. I've only mentioned 3 of these trends today: the shift of power from west to east, the enormous rise of digital technology, and the urgency to address the issues of sustainability. We can look at these as unwelcome challenges or as enormous opportunities for growth. My expectation is that everyone in marketing will certainly view them as opportunities. The biggest ones, I believe, that we've seen for generations. Countless actually know 2 things: innovation and creativity. I look certainly forward to seeing much more of it from the industry, and especially from our partners as we move into this exciting new era for marketing. Thanks for your attention.
Okay, we're 20 minutes in and no questions as yet. That might be a server problem, but anybody's got any questions, please send them in. Now Paul, you talked about the long term and strategy. And two questions really for this morning's news, because it was about structure. But maybe before we ask you about, and Keith, what the new structure, the change in structure, Harish, you've appointed as Chief Operating Officer, and then you've made some changes to the category heads. And maybe talk about structure. But before that, could you say a little bit, because what we've noticed is in the last 4 weeks, literally the last 4 weeks, there's been considerably raised levels of concern about the world economy, QE2 being taken back, and have you noticed any significant change in the mature parts of the world and the faster growth parts of the world? Any changes in the short term that you see, and what impact, if any, on advertising promotion? I should remind everybody that Unilever spends on A&P, that's advertising and promotion, about 6 billion euros, about 14% of 45 billion euros of sales, a market cap of 60 billion pounds, so $100 billion. So this is probably one of the largest in the top 2 investors in advertising and promotion in the world, sir.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to change, Martin, because of the news of just 1 month alone. We looked at the crisis when it started in 2008, beginning of 2009. I actually became CEO of this, at that time of this marvelous institution, and it probably was the best thing that happened to me, because coming in from the outside and standing on the soapbox and telling everybody to change would probably not have been as engaging as this crisis, which provided this burning platform. And as you know, we've transformed the company fairly quickly. At that time, we built our business model on a premise that I think still is the premise that you've been saying, I know, and that I've been preaching. No doubt about the amount of deleveraging that needs to happen in the economy, and what is that going to do to the consumer. And denying that is just fooling yourself. John Beddington, the UK chief scientific advisor, was talking about shifts and shocks. I think we're entering a period for a long time to come where we know what the shifts are, driven by population, moving east, some of the things I talked about, but increasingly is being influenced by shocks. Shocks might come from geopolitical shocks, climate change, material, political shocks that we've certainly been seeing, and then diverting monetary policies actually in different parts of the world, which are not helping either. At the end of the day, it provides more uncertainty for the consumer, there's no doubt about that. And I think you will see slower growth in the developed markets, whilst growth in the developing markets is easing off a little bit. And you see the 5th or 6th interest rate increase in India, you see the same in China. So we plan our business accordingly. But I think it's a wonderful time for brands, because consumers in that uncertainty will look for security, will look for beacons, will look for guidance. So despite all of this, we've actually put our advertising up by 500 million. Last year we had our record growth in about 25 years as a company. So I don't get really sidetracked. Organization, just take the realities of the market into account. Be like consumer we need to serve. She certainly has an enormous pressure on her wallet, especially in this part of the world. Not going to decrease in the next 4 or 5 years.
Well, just on that, because we do a lot of institutional presentations to analysts, and even before the last 4 weeks, we have been put under considerable pressure by analysts and investors on this issue about investment in advertising promotion, and particularly FMCG companies like Unilever. We've been told they're reducing their spending because of increased commodity input costs.
Yeah, that would be a tragedy, because that would be a tragedy if that was going to play out that way. We've said to the market, and as you know, we cannot talk about results when we still have to announce them in a few weeks' time. But we've said to the market our goal this year is at least to have the absolute spending flat from significant increases we've done. Drive efficiencies, obviously, with some efforts that Keith is leading. But at a time like this, it's more important even that brands connect to consumers. We've introduced about 100 of our brands in new country combinations that we were not in. As we talk right now, we're introducing Dove in China, as you know, we're introducing Magnum in the US. These are big bets and big launches, and we have to spend money behind that. The worst that could happen to the industry is everything gravitates towards pricing and promotion. So we're very mindful of that, and we are actually spending a lot of time putting a business model out there for our people to do the right thing. That's why we stopped doing quarterly reporting. That's why we stopped giving guidance. We have to provide that space to not indeed get these knee-jerk reactions that when there is a little bit of bad news or a certain cost in a quarter, that we do the wrong thing. It just takes time to build these brands, and we will need to nurture.
So it would be right to conclude the P is down and the A is up?
Definitely that is how the year will play out, in my opinion.
Okay, let's turn to the structural changes that you've made this morning. And I don't want to delve too deeply, but you've come from Boston, from the Harvard Business School, where I think you had a senior management marketing emphasis conference. Any conclusions you can share with us immediately on that, and maybe talk about the structural changes you made?
Well, let me just explain very briefly why we are making these structural changes, and it's a normal part of the evolution. We've planned it a long time. my predecessor, Patrick Chescal, did a very courageous step to move Unilever to one organization. We used to be fairly fragmented, decentralized. He called it one Unilever. And that was the right thing to do. But unfortunately, over the last 10 years, the company had not performed in terms of growth and share to its full capacity. So when I became CEO, it was very important to put the growth agenda back. And the first step that we did was focus on the markets, not surprisingly, get the right people in the markets, improve the quality of execution, because that you can do right away, and spend money behind our brands, a little bit more discipline in the total system. And you saw the shares going up in 2009 and 2010 even further. At the same time, we put global organizations in place to strengthen our interdependence and to move faster. Keys is a good example of that. Global marketing at the board level, we see a tremendous step change in capabilities and in the way we approach that. We did the same with global supply, finance, strong global roles. So I believe that now was the right time, as we want to become an 80 billion company or more, that we put our category structure in place also to reflect that. So what we simply did was we created 4 categories at the president level, which allows us to have higher caliber people there, attract higher caliber people, get more focus, accelerate our innovation programs further. And then parallel to that, make Harish the Chief Operating Officer, so that we can again put our clusters of countries, our resources, easier behind where the growth is. We basically move from defining the world in 3, with some frictions around that, to 1, and that not only hopefully will result in further acceleration of our innovations, but also rolling it out faster across the markets. As I said, 56% of our resources is already in the emerging markets. We are rapidly moving more of our businesses in the emerging markets. We're rapidly moving more of our resources to that. Harish, as you know, is located in Singapore, and that is, I think, is a good signal of what I'm telling you.
Well, that says 2 things. One is Harish is located in Singapore, which I'm willing to bet that a major multinational will locate its whole operation in Singapore within a few years from the West, which talks about the power balance and shift. But also he's an Indian, and it's yet another example of Unilever promoting to very senior levels fast-growing market people. But just come back to what you said. Anything from Harvard you want to say? Or?
Well, what we do in Harvard, that has become a little bit of an annual event. It is our top 35 people in the company that represent about 80% of our turnover. It gives me an opportunity for 4 or 5 days to see our talent base. We usually, that group, you want to obviously deliver the results, but you'd love to have them think a year or 2 out. If we want to pull this organization up, that management team has to be at a little bit ahead of the company. I always say you have to hire 80 billion people before you have your 80 billion business. So we spend a lot of time in a week like that sharpening our strategy. That's where we invented the compass, that's where we did the turbocharging of the compass, which is serving as well. And the time was spent on sharpening our strategies moving forward, for the next 2 years. And without going into the details there, because I might as well give my competitors a phone call, I'm very encouraged that we're on the right track there.
Okay. Now, just bringing Keith into the conversation, in Paul's speech he talked several times about agencies not having the right structures, agency partners, the innovation, creativity is going to be even more important in the future as power shifts to the southeast, digital sustainability, the issues that you're talking about. Now, Unilever is structured from a marketing point of view, brand building and brand development. And is that the right structure? Because just from the agency's point of view, we can only provide integrated and seamless solutions. And I mean truly seamless, not the BS that sometimes is talked about. We can only produce that if the client has a seamless organization too. It's no good us trying to sell in to several buying points. There has to be one buying point. With BB and BD, and maybe you explain to everybody what that really means, it's segmented. It's not unified. So inherently, there's a fragmentation there that's quite difficult at a global and local level for the agency to deal with, no matter how resourceful it is.
Well, let me just first of all explain what brand development and brand building means to us. So brand development is where the equity is developed. So that would be everything from the proposition, the advertising, through to innovation, design, etc. So the mix as you see it. And what we wanted to do was to leverage Unilever's scale in across the world, but also scale in expertise in focusing a category organisation, as we call it, around the mixed development. Then we have brand building, and brand building are focused in local markets. And what brand building does is bring it alive in a relevant way, ensures that the brand zings locally, and we have the appropriate training for local markets. Now, of course, wherever you have your marketing department, you'll have people in different roles. What we have been doing recently, particularly around digital, is changing roles. So when we first put this organisation in place, in fact, a lot of the digital work was done by our brand building people. And I think you're right to say that did create some vibration. You had the sort of video and visual equities being done by brand development, and then you had some of the digital stuff done by brand building. So what we've done recently is we've now moved all the equity-driven digital work into brand development, and along with the budget. So every bit of brand equity building, all the levers are now with brand development, which I think will help clear up your concern in that area. That's something we're doing right now, so that's sort of in transition. Having said that, of course, the local role, brand building, is incredibly important for us in the digital space as well. So if you are going to have a community manager engaging online with Dove in China, it better be the local Chinese team in Mandarin, not some global person. So for an organisation like ours, we've got to be very clear on roles and responsibilities. We want to be the most local of the big players, most local of the global players. So we want to make sure that we engage locally with consumers, one by one. That's where it all happens. And then similarly, come up with some fantastic equity building through the categories.
What drives you nuts about the agencies you deal with, and in relation to traditional versus digital, which Paul said or implied almost as a difference. So we're looking for seamless and integrated, and it seems to be that what Paul's saying is there's some different challenges there. Do you think there are different structures between traditional? I know people get upset when you separate the two and say everything's digital, etc., etc. But should we have different structures? And what drives you, Dottie, about dealing with us?
Well, you when you say us,
I didn't say me. What drives you, Dottie, dealing with me?
I don't know how personal you want to get.
Up close and personal.
I think the thing that's difficult right now is the complexity. I mean, I can remember discussing media plans ad nauseam when we were debating whether we should sort of drip or burst and etc. when I was a brand manager. And if you look at a media plan now, oh my God, it's completely different. So I think the first thing is the huge complexity, and I think we use lines like traditional and digital because it helps bucket things, but they're hopeless buckets, really. The traditional puts together TV, cinema, radio, print, and digital puts together mobile and search and e-commerce, etc. So I think the biggest challenge we have right now is the complexity of bringing together mixes across so many different mediums. But that, of course, is the opportunity.
Right.
And that's what we'll make sure that we then can actually sort of steal the lead and ensure that we're more effective, we're more creative, we're more engaging across them. So what does that mean? It means actually right now is we're engaging with multiple agencies because the specialist agencies like on mobile or specialist agencies on social have given us greater insights to date than the breadth. Now the answer is, as you know, we're doing everything. So we're working with the traditional agencies across the breadth. We're working with yourselves, where we use it with different agencies within WPP, and we're working with some specialists as well. And we'll see how the model comes out. But as far as I'm concerned, I want to work with the best wherever they are, and that's what we're striving for.
But interesting, I mean, Mike Polk this week there was a significant amount of play in Ad Age this week about shopper marketing and channel marketing, and how he talked to John Wren and myself about how Omnicom and WPP might respond to the trade marketing challenges, and went with actually an ex-Ogilvy guy, been at Ogilvy for about 20 years, who set up a small, obviously, trade channel marketing company a year or so ago, and put a project in there. Are we likely to see more fragmentation of that like, or less? And how does that fit in with trying to integrate this?
Yeah, so I mean, the answer is right now, of course, is we're using a lot of our marketing resources to do the integration, and also a lot of yours to do the integration, and that's a challenge. And clearly, the more agencies you go to, the more it's fragmented, and the harder you have to work on the integration. Totally accept that. But just remember, if you want to work with the best, I prefer to put more effort into the integration than to compromise on the quality to get something that's sort of simpler. But I'm sure we will get there. And of course, you have great agencies in that area as well. So I think what we will see is agencies, yours and others, actually pulling it together, because it will certainly make my life easier, and I think it would make the whole integration easier, and that will be a more successful.
Well, to that point, with our largest client, Ford Motor Company, and Jim Farley, the CMO, was here this morning. The reason, and obviously I'm biased, but I think the client has said it too, and others said it. The reason that has been so effective is that Alan Mullally came in 3 or 4 years ago and talked about one Ford, and disgorged the premium brands, focused on the blue oval, and everybody is clear. This is really seamless stuff. We launched Focus, which was a World Cup. But the point I think which is really important is that Ford is one Ford. And now we're rolling that out around the world, in Shanghai, in London, and in Sao Paulo. So I think your structure and our structure has to be engaged and very similar. Just coming back to...
let me just quickly, the BDBB structure is really a commitment to lead marketing people in the countries. Increasingly so, that is absolutely important. And I see many of our competitors pulling marketing resources away from the countries and centralizing that. We just don't try the opposite. And in any matrix structure, you'll get some friction, I understand that, but that's not different from the different service providers we have to deal with on the agency side. I think that's what keys. But I firmly believe that leaves us locally relevant is going to be a point of differentiation with our competitors. Where the biggest challenge for the agencies is not different from our challenge. When the world was a little bit more stable and you just had the normal shifts, we could look at optimizing. And we've created good people in our companies and the agencies to optimize things, optimize reads, optimize frequency, optimize which TV channel to use in communication. And that was pretty much the last 20 years. And all the people that are in our jobs are trained that way, and the world is going well. Now you don't even know what the next trend is because you're not in charge. It's the consumer. Nobody predicted that very soon Amazon might be bigger than Walmart, that they would be selling 2/3 of the books. That Facebook takes off the way it does, and which country it takes hold. Nobody knows that. So we're all a little bit like deer in a headlight, catching up, holding fancy conferences to explain it. But what it really does is it requires new skills and new setups between agencies and ourselves in a radically new way to think about that. And at the end of the day, the answer goes back to who has the knowledge. And increasingly, those are the Googles, the Facebooks, the Amazons who have that knowledge. And that's unsettling the industry, but it's unsettling as much our side as your side. And that's a huge opportunity at the same time. But unfortunately, it's being led by people that have been 20 years in that steady mood that just don't really I think are up to that challenge. And that's really what we have to figure out.
But just to that point, you mentioned, Walmart is the 7th largest country in the world by retail sales, just behind China. Tesco has, just in terms of intelligence with dunnhumby, several packaged goods manufacturers in America have said to me their best source of data is dunnhumby. Do the retailers have too much power?
Well, I've always said already 50 years ago, you can go on the record that retailers become media companies because at the end of the day, they know the consumer, the shopper better with that data that we have, so you have to look at that. But that's also rapidly shifting again. Nobody thought that Amazon would be bigger than Walmart, potentially. So, e-commerce is rapidly taking off at a speed that is much faster. So, and that is unsettling, again, the conventional retail models. So, yeah, it is the shift is happening quickly where that knowledge is.
Right. But I think what's interesting there is the shift to digital is actually changing that. So I totally buy there was a time when the retail had the complete sort of engagement of the data. But with digital now and the whole social graph, I think it's a fantastic opportunity as brand owners to engage directly with consumers and the data.
But I wouldn't say the retail in the way you would define it is that a threat or not is something we have to think about. But just look at it now. It's really when somebody says nobody in charge, well, that's actually absolutely wrong. The consumer is now in charge. And it's going very fast. If they can bring down a regime in Egypt in about 6 weeks' time, they can bring us down in nanoseconds. And yet we have 2 billion consumers using us every day, and we're now able to connect with them digitally. It's fine to say Walmart is the 7th biggest nation, but Facebook is the 3rd. And with our connectivity, the scale that we have and some other companies, we're connecting increasingly and giving that company that we represent to the consumers. And if we can make that connection, that's a tremendous force. Also a force for good, by the way. People, let's take an example of one of our brands, Lipton. A person says, well, I don't make a difference, I just need a little tea bag of Lipton and drink a cup of tea. So if I buy sustainable tea or not, who cares? My neighbor doesn't do it, why should I do it? But if you tell them you're part of a movement of 2 billion people, small acts but big differences, multiply your little tea bag that is sustainable tea by 2 billion. So we are creating these consumer movements and connecting them to us and our cause. The company becomes theirs, the cause is the right one, and galvanize that change. The new world is allowing you to do that. Do I worry about Facebook? Do I worry about Amazon? Do I worry about Walmart? No, they're actors in that, but the playing field is rapidly changing. I worry more about what the playing field changes are than the actors themselves.
So Mark Zuckerberg should not be worried about monetizing Facebook as a social phenomenon, as a communications phenomenon. It's powerful enough. Don't worry about intruding into...
No, there's always a how. I mean, this morning, I don't know if you read the Financial Times, but coming in here on the plane, there was a little article about Twitter, trying to do the same thing. I mean, you're much closer than I am. It's not a matter of... I don't think anything is sustainable long term if you don't monetize it. The part of the sustainability is that it has to have a model that is financially viable. That's unfortunately or fortunately the case. That's how the world functions, and increasingly so. But you have to do it in ways that is rapidly changing. I don't see any reason why a Facebook or a Twitter cannot be monetized. But the way that is happening has to be carefully thought through. There's no doubt about it.
I listened, as always, very carefully to what you said. And you said at one stage, agencies and your partners have to provide things at a lower cost. The balance, and I think it's going to come in the session with James and Jeffrey later, the balance between creativity, innovation, R&D, and finance and procurement. I mean, I was very struck as an ex-CFO with the fact that more than 50% of the FTSE 100 CEOs are CFOs. You yourself held that title at Nestle. Is the balance out of kilter? The first question I asked Keith last year is, do we sell widgets? I think many people in this amphitheatre would feel that the balance of power has shifted inside the companies that we deal with too much to finance and procurement, and marketing, to some extent, has lost its voice.
I wouldn't agree.
Thank God for that. But explain, because in our day-to-day interactions, not with Unilever, of course, but in our day-to-day interactions with the big companies, and even some of the smaller companies. I mean, actually, there is a difference. Founder-driven companies are different. They are more intuitive. Interestingly, in this recession, I think some of them have reacted more quickly to some of the challenges. So,
I think we're increasing. I'm just thinking I have a little bit of time here, but I think we're getting increasingly better at figuring out how to get returns from our spendings, from our investments. So the bar is being set higher, and call it finance people or not have to play a role in that. But if I look at it at an industry level, I mean, advertising spending is going up. If I look at the money we spend in innovation, we're putting more in. The products we launch. But you see, but this is a world that you work for the consumer. I don't work for Unilever. I work for the consumer. I work for you. I work for the consumer. And the consumer is hurting. And increasingly he's worried, and he has to do more with less. And you have to be very close to them. And more than ever, when everything was going well, we were a little bit relaxed in the way we ran the world, because tomorrow was always better than yesterday. Now you have to work a little bit harder for it. That's why in Unilever we frozen salaries for 3 years. People understand that it's the same thing. It's not that we become finance driven, it's that we care a little bit more about the consumer. We have the major ROMI efforts now going on. Why only now when you've been in business for 100 years? Because we have better tools to do that. So I think we're becoming a little bit more responsible business in that sense. But you see, my goal is that any penny I can squeeze out of the system that the consumer is not willing to pay for, that's how I look at it, I put straight back in the business to accelerate growth. That's why we had the record growth last year for over 30 years. And as we grow a company, we provide opportunities, we give our products to more consumers and improve their lives, have bigger impacts on communities, and that is what we're here for. That's the reason for being on this planet for the short time that we can enjoy it. So that discipline, that standard is gone higher, but it shouldn't be it shouldn't result in finance people trying to run our business. That would be a tragedy, and I don't think that's happening, to be honest.
Just one, we have to sort of run out of time, or officially we run out of time. Just keep going. Just one more question. Paul, you've had, unlike Keith, experience of two other major FMCGs, Nestle, most recently before Unilever, and then Procter for many years. What's the difference between Unilever and Nestle, or both pluses and minuses between Unilever and those two companies?
Well, I always like to focus on the commonalities first, because you're talking about three of the greatest consumer goods companies, and that is because they take a long-term view. They have enormous values with which they operate, integrity, long-term, investing in their people. So I think there are more commonalities that makes these companies built to last versus built to sell, and I feel very comfortable about each and all of them and the role they play in society. And that has come out even more so in the crisis that we currently play. But there are differences, obviously, that come from origins or where the company was born. If you're in a Midwestern American company trying to run a global company, a global company needs to a certain type of thinking that influences the way you go to market. Very disciplined, very global, but perhaps challenging in a world that is rapidly moving east. We are a company that came from a colonial history, very strong presence in these emerging markets. In my top 30 people, 40%, 50% are from the emerging markets already. We just talked about Harish. So 55, 56% already there. So that creates a different culture, I would say. So value is the same for all these companies, culture differently. And then partly these cultures are driven by your product mix as well. If you're in the food business, which we are partly, or if you're with Nestle, you tend to be much closer to society. We tend to work with farmers, we tend to work up the supply chain. And those are companies, not surprisingly, if you look even in today's world, are the ones that are moving the boundaries of what corporate sustainability or shared value looks like. You actually find them there, because again, it's so much in the DNA, the way these companies grow up.
And Nestle based in Vevey?
Nestle is based in Vevey, that's correct.
Different attitude or not? Different attitude or not?
Oh well, that's, I know you have your opinions and I fully support them.
Whatever they may be. Well, we're going to get yanked off by the theatrical hook, but I want to thank Paul and Keith on an amazingly complex schedule.
Next up, and thank you, gentlemen.